Hi, my name is Erin, and I wanted to do a really informal video telling my story just because I really wish that I had known some of these things ahead of time when I had my own miscarriage a while ago. So, two parts to this. I want to tell you what happened to me and then just kind of recap by giving my advice for anybody who is in a similar situation. And when I say similar situation, I mean if you have a miscarriage that is of a child that you had wanted, it was a wanted planned pregnancy, and you're devastated by finding out that your child has passed away. So first of all, if you're watching this and you have had a miscarriage, I'm so sorry. It truly is, I think, one of the hardest things that you can go through. Of course, everybody goes through loss, everybody loses loved ones, but I think that losing your own child is harder. The only thing I can imagine that would be harder is to lose an older child, a child who has been born and you've had even more time to know them. I lost my pregnancy at about 11 weeks. I consider it 11 weeks because I was pregnant for 11 weeks. They did tell me that it looked like he had stopped growing around 9 weeks. But anyway, first trimester miscarriage are the most common. So I wanted to make this for people who have had a miscarriage before 20 weeks, and you'll see why in a minute. So my story started 3 years ago, and my fiance and I, now husband, really wanted to have a baby together, and I got off birth control and we got pregnant right away. We got pregnant within a couple weeks. So we were super excited, and we also found out super quickly, like, I don't know, I feel like I get positive pregnancy tests quickly, like I'll get a positive pretty quickly, so I found out when we were only like 2-3 weeks along. So from that time to 11 weeks, it was 2 months that we loved this baby and we were excited. So, even if you're only pregnant for 3-4 weeks, it's gonna be heartbreaking. So this wasn't my first baby. I already had a 10-year-old, which you would think whenever I had thought about miscarriage before, I always thought, well, if you already have a kid, then it must make it easier, if you have a miscarriage. No, it doesn't. And I also thought if you have a kid after you have a miscarriage, then you feel better and you move on and it's not so bad. No. I still think about Cal every day. It's been a year and a half since he would have been born, and I have the count up app in my phone, and I put in, the date, and it counts up, so I know that he would have been a year and a half today. And that's how I feel about it. Other people will feel different ways, that's just how I feel about it. But to try and tell this in a more sequential order, so this was not at all like my first pregnancy. I was extremely sick. I was extremely nauseous. And I started having bleeding at about 4 weeks, I think it was. It was pretty early on that I started having some bleeding, and it was pretty mild. And then I had like a gush of blood, and I was like, oh my God, I think that I've had miscarried. But I had still positive pregnancy tests, and I went to the ER, and they're like, we can't tell. And then I went into the doctor's office and had a internal sonogram, and they were like, yeah, the heartbeat's good, like everything looks good. The only thing is you have a subchorionic hemorrhage. So you do have like a lot of bleeding going on. And that was really scary, but they said most of the time these things just clear up on their own. There's nothing we can do about it, but you shouldn't worry about it because you don't need to do anything differently, and it should be fine. And that did match what I read, online, that a lot of times that these things, I think it was like maybe like 60 to 80% of the time they will heal, and then the rest of the time you will miscarry, and there literally is nothing you can do. But the bleeding did not stop. The cramping did not stop. And I was working this whole time. I didn't take the time off. This went on for like a month. It was over a month of this until one day I went to the restroom and I noticed more blood than usual. And then I stood up from, you sit on the toilet, then you stand up. And it was like the blood just rushed out. And it got all over the place, and I freaked out. I was hysterical, sobbing, and my fiance came in and he cleaned it up, and he like tried to comfort me, and I was just like, don't touch me, don't try and comfort me. Like, I know that it's not okay. And that probably is, based on the timeline, that probably is when the placenta detached so much from the uterine wall that there just wasn't enough blood flow to the fetus anymore. So that probably is the point where the heart would stop beating and my baby passed away. And when I was able to come in a day or two later, they did the ultrasound, and I still had hope, so to hear, them, to watch them looking and looking and looking, and being completely quiet for a few minutes, and then to hear there's no heartbeat, I was just absolutely crushed. And then they have another person come in and double check. That's like policy that they have them double check. And then they're like, yeah, I'm so sorry that we can't detect any heartbeat. And it looks like this is the size of a 9-week embryo. So they switched from calling it a fetus to an embryo, because I think it's 10 weeks that you're officially a fetus, and an embryo is before that. So yeah, that maybe you won't be sensitive to these kinds of things, but for me, like, going from the doctors and nurses saying, oh, your baby, your fetus, to saying, oh, the embryo, that already felt like a slap in the face to me. But the main thing is just that your baby has gone. So they tell you about your options, and they don't tell you much. You have to ask questions, because they're not going to tell you much. They're going to say, you can, assuming you don't have any health problems going on otherwise, or any other risk factors, they'll say you can wait for the baby to come away, or no, they're not gonna say that. You say that they'll wait for the products of conception, because now your baby is the products of conception. You can wait for that to come away naturally on its own. This is assuming you have a missed miscarriage and you haven't already had that happen. I don't know what percentage of miscarriages are missed miscarriages, but a missed miscarriage is when the baby is still inside of you, even though it's no longer, the heart is not beating. So that's one option. It's called expectant monitoring. And they'll let you do that for, I think, a couple weeks. I don't know exactly the maximum amount of weeks, but you can do that for a while, and then they will be kind of like, well, we need to do something about it. The second option is they'll give you basically the Plan B medication. Something similar to that, where it's just going to cause a lot of cramping. And then the same thing will happen. Do that at home. They just have you take that pill, and then they have you wait and maybe take some painkillers, because you're going to have really strong cramps. And then the third option is surgical removal, which they don't describe to you in very good detail. They just say, you would have your cervix dilated, and then they would remove the products of conception. Now, most people do expectant monitoring, or they take the pills to cause the cramping. I didn't go that route. The reason I didn't go that route is because for two reasons. One, I knew what a 9 to 11 week fetus looks like, and it scared me because it looks like a baby bird. It looks like a baby bird that just has to have its egg with no feathers, and that wasn't the idea in my mind that I had of my baby. Like, in my mind, my baby was like a full-term baby with beautiful, chubby little face and eyes and everything. And, you know, a 9 to 11 week fetus is beautiful too in its own way, but it wasn't what I pictured in my mind. And I also had this kind of irrational fear because they told me that it might have been up to 2 weeks ago that my baby had passed away. I had this fear that my baby might have decayed to some degree. Probably that doesn't happen. I don't know, but I didn't feel like I could ask because I didn't think A, that they would know, B, that they would care, and then C, that they would think that that was a normal thing for me to ask. So I didn't know what my baby would look like, and I knew that it wouldn't look like what I had an image of in my mind. However, I still very much wanted my baby. I wanted to take him, wrap him up, hold him, and bury him. And I didn't think that that was too much to ask. And I was worried that I wouldn't be able to do that if I was at work and then my baby came away, and then what do I do with it? Or if I waited a long time and then maybe the baby had just turned into just menses, like period blood, you know? So I thought, because I didn't ask anyone, I didn't know any better, I thought that if I went the surgical route, because they could get me in the next day, I thought that I would have what they do when you're further along, which is when they just basically induce labor and then they deliver the fetus, the deceased fetus. I thought that's what was going to happen. That is not what happens. They take you to a room, they give you a strong painkiller, you sit there and wait for 30 minutes, then they take you to the procedure room. And they did tell me ahead of time, this procedure room is mostly used for abortions. It's the same procedure. We will put a note on your file that says that you have lost your baby so that the people that are working with you know what's going on and will be sympathetic. And they did do that, and that was good. And I guess I just had a little bit higher expectations because the technicians, it was just like a day at the office for them, and they were just joking, laughing, and having a good time for the most part. And it was extremely painful. And I didn't realize that they have to scrape the inside of your uterus, basically. They put in a tube, they put in a tool, and the tool scrapes it away, and then the tube sucks out everything that's inside. So when I came into the room, I saw this machine, and it looked like a food processor. And it was full of blood, and I thought, that can't be the stuff from the last person who came in here. That can't be somebody's baby, is it? No, it was, and I should have stopped right there, and I wish to God that I had stopped right there and said, you know what, this actually isn't what I want to do, because it was a huge mistake. It is one of the biggest regrets that I have in my life, that I didn't just stop right there and say, no, I don't want to do this, because I didn't realize that you were going to turn my baby into a smoothie. But that's what it is. So I was so shaken. I was so destroyed. The procedure only took maybe 5-10 minutes. But by the time it was done, I could barely walk. I was in so much pain. And I wanted to ask them, when are you going to give me I don't care if it's soup. Whatever is left I want to take it home. But I didn't say anything because I was embarrassed. So I got in the car and I messaged my doctor. This was before a holiday weekend, so I had to wait 4 days, and I got a message back from her saying, I'm so sorry, I thought you knew. You cannot have the remains. We have to dispose of them with the way that we have to dispose of bio waste. Now, if you live in California, there's a law in California that says if you have a miscarriage after 20 weeks, you have to bury or cremate the remains. Before 20 weeks, you have to dispose of it as medical waste, unless it is an identifiably human fetus. That is the language. And obviously, if you are turning babies into smoothies, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry for the graphic description, but that's what it is. Then it's not an identifiable fetus anymore. Okay? So if you have a miscarriage and it is important to you to keep the remains of your baby, I really, really strongly urge you to think about your options. But I'll get to the advice once I finish my story. So I got that news. I was devastated that I was never going to get to do any of those things that I had wanted to do for closure and for my baby and for his memory. I didn't even do a early gender test. You know, you can do them now at 6 weeks. And I wish I had asked them if they could have done a gender test. I mean, they have the technology. They could have done it. But they do all this obligatory testing on the, they call it products of conception. So we got weeks later, we got test results back. And it said fetal parts found. And it said how many grams they collected. And that was it. It said no abnormalities, no reason. And they said that almost every single time there's no reason found for the miscarriage. But in my case, they actually did know the reason. They knew that it was because of the hemorrhage, and the hemorrhage was because of the placenta not attaching properly to the uterine wall. So that's the end. That's the end of my story. And it was 3 years ago, and I still think about it every day. I still am very, very sad that, of course, that we are not going to have that little guy in our lives, but also the way that we did not get to have the kind of closure that I wanted. So, as to recommendations, I strongly recommend you look at your options, and if you do care about what happens to I'm not saying that you have to care. You might feel like that's the same thing as period blood, and that's not my baby, and I don't mind because my baby's soul is with God or whatever you believe in. But if you do care about the remains, as I did, I really, really urge you to let every single person know that. Like, say, put it in my file, write it in my file. I do not give you permission to keep my baby's remains. You do not have permission. And if you can let your baby pass at home, you know, I would do that now if I could go back in time. If you're scared of what your baby's going to look like, you know, I totally get that, because I was really scared of that too. But I don't think that fear is worth the cost of not having to look at that. And if you do feel that you are going to go the surgical route, whether it's because you're worried about your own health or because you're worried about having that come out of you, just prepare yourself that it is going to be painful. It is not going to take a long time. The technicians told me that it doesn't matter what the situation is, it's not going to take a long time. So, you know, it's painful, but imagine like the worst cramps you've ever had and then double that, but it's only for a few minutes. So you can do it. You can absolutely do it. You're going to be okay. I wish I could give advice of what you can do if you do have your baby's remains, and how you can memorialize them. I know that you can't. I did look into how you can have your baby's remains buried. It is costly, and you can have them cremated, you know, again, costly. Because it is so tiny, what the thought that I had was that I was just going to bury because I'm a homeowner, so I was just going to bury my baby probably on my own property. But if you go the route of surgical removal and it's before 20 weeks and you can't get your remains and you still want to have a memorial, or if you find yourself like how I did and it was a surprise to you that you don't get your baby's remains, the other thing you can do is make a memory box. So this is what I made, and it was kind of nice because my fiance and I made it together. So he did the staining on it. We picked it out and then he stained it and he put the sealant on it. You can see it's shiny. And then I put the heart, the Sacred Heart on there. We're Irish Americans, so we like the Sacred Heart. And then this is the name we were going to give him, Callahan. So I put that on the inside. And then this was like a little thing that I had bought for like a pregnancy announcement, because it was a week before we were going to do our pregnancy announcement. So I had already bought some things to make a little public pregnancy announcement. So that's what this is for. And then this is a little note that came with some flowers from my auntie that she sent me. And then I took a ton of pregnancy tests with this baby, but I just kept 3 of them as little memory things. So one of them was when I first found out that I was pregnant. That's one that with like a faint line. And then the other 2 are each time, I believe it's each time that I had like a lot of bleeding and I was so scared that I lost the baby, and then I took a pregnancy test and it was still positive, so that's why I have 3. And then this is a little sympathy note. And then I have a couple of sonograms, and then I have one sonogram that is the only one where you can really see anything in there. And that is in a frame to make sure that it stays in good shape. And then I have a little letter that I wrote to the baby. It says, "Dear baby Cal," because that's like the little nickname we would have made for him. So that's what we did. Oh, that's interesting. It's a little letter C. I'm not really sure how that got in there. Maybe my mom put that in there. Look at that. So that's what I did. You know, I took a long time thinking about the letter, and I wrote it, and I put the box together, and then I showed my fiance the box, and I had him read the letter, and he's not like a guy who cries easily, and he kind of like teared up, so that was kind of a special moment. So yeah, that was a small thing that I could do, and I have it right by my bed, and so that makes me happy to have that little memory. But it's not what I wanted. So that's why I wanted to make this video, so that anybody who sees this can check their local guidelines, because I looked it up and all the states have different guidelines. And they're always changing, especially with the current climate around what you do with a fetus and all of that stuff. So if you're pregnant, if you're in the first trimester and you have a subchorionic hemorrhage, or if you have had a miscarriage or a miscarriage, I hope that this has helped you, and I wish you the best.